Welcome to Clarity 16.0 Supportability Training. In this section, we will review several accessibility enhancements. This release includes several accessibility improvements encompassing visual design, responsive design, keyboard navigation, and screen reader support. These are essentially the key tenets of any accessibility initiative. And so kind of what's new, specifically, the main kind of left navigation has been updated. So the screen reader announces each workspace using their respective naming conventions. And there's an improvement that's been in place for vertical scroll and keyboard navigation support when the page itself is maximized or minimized. Keyboard options are now in place for users to either navigate directly to or edit an object, like a project name or an investment name, URL, or an attachment link. My timesheet is now compliant. The timesheets grid notes module is compliant, and page level navigation is in place for keyboard users that supports tab navigation through the application level header, the common action bar, the main page content, which in most pages is the grid. In addition, the financials module received an update to support keyboard navigation for the cost plan, budgets, benefit plans, and actual transaction menu options. Several other miscellaneous items were updated to ensure that avatar is color contrast compliant, and has that needed keyboard navigation support for accessing settings, including profile and general logout menu options. Keyboard navigation and visible focus improvements were also put in place for column, panel, and detailed flyout tabs. Improved handling of managing pick lists, the auto suggest pull down menu, the plus button, and pages with tiles such as custom investments, custom objects, and administration also received an update. So why is this important? Each of these accessibility improvements are needed to drive adoption. Organizations are really demanding, they really require that software vendors comply with accessibility standards to ensure all of their users have access to clarity to perform their day-to-day tasks. Each accessibility improvement considers these four pillars, as I mentioned before, in terms of color contrast, responsive design, keyboard control, and of course, screen readers. Now, with this major push in our rearview mirror, the Clarity team is now pursuing the VPAT certification, which will indicate that we are conformant with Section 508, which is the main accessibility act in the US. From a timing perspective, our goal is to complete that process in Broadcom's fiscal year Q1. So in other words, we want to wrap up that VPAT cert before January of 2022. That's our target. All right, so what's changed? So first thing I want to go over is kind of from a supported accessibility platform perspective. The product team has determined that the combination of the Windows operating system, Chrome, Firefox, and Edge browsers, and the JAWS screen reader are going to be the solution that is considered the supported accessibility platform for the 16.0 release. Screen reader support will be limited to this combination. We just wanted to be really clear on what the platform support is. However, visual and keyboard navigation are supported for both Mac and PC users as well. Now, I want to share with you some of the data that we use to determine those supported accessibility platforms. We'll kind of go through these quickly. This was sourced from third-party survey data. So from the OS perspective, Windows is the clear market leader across the enterprise. You can see some of the stats here. From the browser perspective, Chrome and Firefox are certainly dominant. With IE usage declining, Edge should eventually take its place as a Microsoft option. So these are the 3 browsers that we're going to be supporting from an accessibility standpoint. And then the last important component is the screen reader. JAWS is the clear market leader in the enterprise for full and part-time employees. Just want to call that out. It's maybe their NVDA may be an important tool or widely used tool among all accessibility users, but we're focused on the enterprise, and therefore JAWS becomes the clear solution for that and for the enterprise. Anyway, so those are the main components for the supported accessibility platform and the reasons behind that decision. So let's talk about what's changed. Updates to the main navigation ensure that that screen reader announces each workspace using the correct and respective naming conventions. That screen reader informs the user if the workspace has been previously visited, if it's the current page that they may be on. It tells you it's a button type, and it obviously announces the name of the workspace. In 15.9.3, the screen reader did function on the left nav, but the workspace names were announced not quite correctly. And it also used the term group, which didn't make sense for a typical screen reader user. And there wasn't any other additional information either, so we've extended that. In addition, vertical scroll and keyboard navigation support is improved if the page has been maximized or minimized. Essentially, a vertical scroll bar is introduced when needed. And last, there's actually a right-click action from the main navigation page, which provides an ability to open that workspace, whatever workspace you're clicking on, in a new tab or a new window. This is not necessarily an accessibility improvement, but an improvement nevertheless. There is now keyboard option to navigate directly to that object. In other words, a project name, idea name, or a URL or an attachment using that interactive link that is presented within the cell within a grid. And there's an alternative keyboard option to actually edit either one of those two, the object, the URL, or the attachment within that selected cell. It was great to see this addition make it into the release for keyboard users. In 15.9.3, the keyboard user only had the ability to edit that object or URL or attachment name within the selected cell. There was no way for them to select a link and then navigate to that target area using the keyboard. My timesheet is accessible. All elements of the visual design, responsive design, keyboard navigation, and screen reader support have been considered, and specifically focusing on that period carousel across the top, submit, notes, add and remove task buttons, expand and collapse all controls, the expand and collapse controls for the individual task grouping under an investment, that copy and delete action buttons, which are not typically visible on the screen, searchable dropdowns for input type code, change code, and user value 1 and 2 are considered. And of course, the text boxes that are there for hours or days data entry have all been considered from a keyboard navigation standpoint and screen reader. So when I mention screen reader, when I mention keyboard, I also mean it's got screen reader support. They kind of go hand in hand. An item left over from the 15.9.3 release was to make sure that my timesheet and the notes flyout in particular was compliant. So again, all elements of the 4 tenets of accessibility have been considered to make sure that the notes flyout is itself compliant. We also wanted to make sure the financial module was completely compliant. The grid itself has been compliant for several releases, but we had to make an adjustment or an improvement there to make sure that the release provided keyboard navigation and screen reader support for cost plan, budgets, benefit plans, and actual transaction menu options on the left-hand side there. A few other miscellaneous items were delivered in this release. The avatar is now color contrast compliant. and has that needed support for navigating to settings and about and log out, for example. The keyboard navigation and visible focus improvements were put in place for that plus button. In last release 59.3, when you landed on that plus button, there was really no way to tell that that was your focus point, but it's very clear now in this release. As I mentioned earlier, the pages with tiles, things like custom investment types or custom objects, etc., now are updated from a color contrast perspective. Oh, last thing on the page here is the favorites, or the starred attribute has been updated to be color contrast compliant as well. Okay, so let's look at a few of the new accessibility updates. I will now kind of close out of PowerPoint and navigate over to Clarity. I will start at the login page and will demonstrate how to use keyboard control to access, to either navigate and or edit the project object link, or really an object link, which could be an investment, an idea, or a project. In this section, I'll be using the keyboard only. I'll tell you which keys I'm using to perform each function. I'll start here at the login page and we'll get going. I'll select Tab to highlight the login page and hit return. As you can see, I've landed here directly on my project list page, the grid. The home page is the grid. My home page is not the project tiles page. That page is not compliant with this release, so I've removed that as a page that I have access to eliminate any confusion for the user. I'm going to go ahead and select Tab, and you can see I'm presented with the Skip to Main Content button. That was introduced in the last release, but what that does is it helps me quickly navigate to the grid, which is the main content in this context. So I'll hit return, and I land on the plus button, which is there to add investments. You can see their visible focus has improved for this release. In fact, in the prior release, you couldn't really tell if you were on the button or not just by using the keyboard. So I'm going to hit Tab one more time, and I've landed on the first cell of this grid. Normally, I would use my plus up, down, or right, left keys to navigate the grid. But for today, I just need to navigate to over a couple of keystrokes to put focus on, in this case, the object name, which in our case is a project. It could be an idea, it could be a custom investment type. And this behavior that I'm going to show you, there's the same user experience for URL attributes as well as attachment attribute types. So here we'll just look at it in the context of the project. Now, in the mouse user can easily select a link to navigate directly to in this case, the e-commerce portal, or they can use the edit button with the mouse to edit the name if they wish. So the keyboard user needs the same types of capabilities. So I'm going to go ahead and hit return, and you can see I'm now in the cell and focus is on the link, in this case, the e-commerce portal. I'll come back to that in a second. I'll select Tab to put focus on the Edit button. Selecting Return exposes the area to edit the name of this object, or in this case, the project. Now, in the 15.9.3 release, this is the only option the keyboard user had, was to get to and edit the name. They also need, obviously, the ability to navigate directly to that link. So I'll hit select return one more time, and now I'll select return again to kind of start over. And I've got focus now on the e-commerce portal link. Selecting return one more time actually takes me into and navigates to this particular project and landing on the task module that's configured via Blueprint. Now, I'm not demonstrating any of the task management updates just yet, so I'm not going to go further into the project. I'll just select tab 1, 2. I get my skip domain content, which I don't need to take advantage of. I'd really like to just exit. So I'll hit tab one more time, and you can see the return project button has focus now. So I'll select return and be returned directly back to the project list. That concludes the demo of the project or object link for use with a keyboard. So the next thing I want to talk about is the timesheet and its compatibility from a keyboard perspective. So the first thing I want to do is log out as Ian, and I'm going to use Shift Tab to highlight the upper right. You should see that visible focus around the avatar. That is an area that's changed as well. There was a section there that said hello Ian, for the logged in user. That's where you would have gone and navigated to the various options. So that's been removed and combined with the avatar. I can simply hit return, and now I have the various options to navigate, do what I want. In this case, I'm going to log out, and I'm going to come back in as Ed Carmen, who is a individual contributor, or really a team member, and I'll hit return. Oh, wrong password. Hit tab again, Shift Tab, hit login. You can see a little bit different navigation experience for Ed on the left. He's just a timesheet user. I'm going to hit tab a few times to establish focus on the current period. You see November 8 in the carousel has now got some visible focus on it. So navigating the timesheet from an accessibility standpoint is all based on multiple tab stops. In other words, I'm using tab as my vehicle to move through and perform functions. So I'm going to use it when I select tab. I'll let you know what I'm doing. So I'm going to select tab one more time, and use the submit button is active. I'll hit it again, and notes is active. I'll hit return to just expose the notes button. I'm not going to go through here and navigate, but this is, you can see visible focus is on the X or the close button, but if I were to tab through, I could perform functions there. So I'll just hit return to activate the close and proceed. You can see add tasks is highlighted, remove task is now highlighted, collapse all. I'll hit return to perform that function, and again to expand it. One more tab stop, I'm at the grouping for the tasks. Again, return, expands, collapses. Tabbing again, it takes us to the the actions button, which as you can see, it's not visible from the UX, but it is a mouse user would just go find it, discover it, and use it. But from a keyboard user, it is now a tab stop. Hitting return presents my various options, just up, down arrows. It lets me select one of these if I choose to do so. I'm going to hit tab just to move forward. I'm now into one of the pull downs, input type code. I can go ahead and hit return to expose the options, and use the arrow keys, up, down arrow keys to selection up to find something, and return to select it. You're starting to see a trend here, right? So charge code, hit return. I'm going to change this to test, select it, and move on. And you notice that the delete button is also a tab stop, so I can select that, delete, and I'm back to using return again to find the options, select it, and tab, and move on. For this demo, I'll just enter in some time for the balance of the week. And I'm in Monday. I'll go to Tuesday with a tab. I'll type in 2 hours, and I put in the wrong key, and that's going to tell me, and the screen reader will announce this as well, that this is a data entry field. So I'll just go ahead and do this. Now I've completed what I wanted to do for the demo here. I will use my Shift Tab function to move back to submit. You'll notice that the focus is on the confirm button for the attestation message. That obviously this was a configuration choice to put it in place for the various users. If this was not put in place, right, it would just go right to submit. So I'm on confirm as a focus. So I just hit return and it's submits, and meaning return on my keyboard, not return the timesheet. So that is what I wanted to show off today with respect to the general navigation for timesheets from an accessibility standpoint. Again, it's all based on multiple top tab styles. Yep, so that concludes the accessibility section, and we'll move on to the next section.